At the Milken Global Conference in LA, I'm joined by Bernstein, Senior Fellow at the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities, former Chief Economist to Vice President Biden. Good to see you here.
Nice to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
There's a lot of interesting economic topics being discussed here, and let's start with one that's also being discussed on the campaign trail, and that is, of course, trade. Do you think we're going to move toward more protectionist trade policies regardless of who wins the election?
You know, it's a good question, but I think the answer is a bit more complicated than that, because it's easy to see these trade agreements, whether you're talking about the TPP or the TTIP, as free trade versus protectionism. But I guess, unfortunately, the world has become so much more complicated than that. For example, in the Trans-Pacific Partnership, the TPP, there are significant measures that extend patents, intellectual property, biologic drugs. Their patents are extended. That leads to a kind of protectionism that's embedded in a trade agreement. So it's not so easy to say one side or the other. What I think we are going to see is a lot more scrutiny and pressure on these trade agreements, and we obviously already see that. In fact, whether the TPP is eventually blessed by Congress is still very much up in the air.
It seems like that's not where things are leaning at this point.
Well, it's certainly going to be the case that the president will try to pass the TPP in the lame duck session after the election, but the people I talk to in the Congress give it at best a 50-50. Now, but the important thing, though, is that there's trade agreements, which, as I mentioned, are this really pretty complex legalistic set of rules of the road by which you trade, and then there's globalization, global trade. The latter is just going to keep going, and it's going to keep growing. The trade agreements themselves, they've become really very, very fractious kind of debates.
So how much is globalization to blame then for the income inequality that we're seeing?
It is definitely a part of it. If you look at communities where factories have left, if you look at the wages of production workers, let me just give you a simple way to look at this. From the mid-40s to the mid-70s, the average hourly compensation of a blue-collar worker in manufacturing doubled from about $12 an hour to about $24 an hour. Since then, it's actually been flat in real terms. It's been stuck at around 24, 25 bucks an hour. That's their compensation from basically the mid-70s to now. And that's a period of a great deal of pressure on our manufacturers through trade deficits, which in this country have been really quite large.
Another interesting topic being kicked around in Washington, of course, is what's happening with tax inversions. And President Obama wants Congress to go further. Treasury got the ball rolling. Will Congress make a tougher move on tax inversions, and should Congress do that?
Yes, I think they should. No, I think they won't. I don't see Congress at all disposed to really do anything particularly substantive in the tax space. And if they did, it's not even clear that inversions would be where they would go. I think the Treasury has done their best, and in fact, the most recent move really had some teeth in it, as you saw some companies actually started to rethink their inversion plans. But remember, this is just the way in which a company doesn't really move its operations, it really just moves its tax mailbox so as to take advantage of this loophole in the tax code while still taking advantage of our infrastructure, our workforce, our rules of law. So in this sense, I really wish Congress would act, but unfortunately, acting is not what this Congress is known for.
It seems that there is more government scrutiny over capitalism these days, and I'll point to the Baker Hughes Halliburton deal being called off, concerns that it wouldn't be approved. How do you explain, I guess, the renewed interest in what's happening in corporate America right now, whether it's where somebody's located or who's going to merge with who?
It's a very good question, and I'm not sure I know the answer. These things kind of evolve over time. Part of it is just almost coincidence in the sense that I know, for example, Treasury's been working on these inversion measures for a long time, and in fact, they trotted out 2 measures before they did this most recent one. The last one seemed to have more teeth. But if I had to take a guess, I would say maybe it has something to do with these campaigns. I mean, whether you look at Republicans or Democrats, you see a great deal of scrutiny and certainly populist anger at a lot of behavior by corporations, corporate actors, that's perceived as very unfair, very privileged, really a big part of the problem. And interestingly, historically, you might hear the Republican candidates kind of defending that, the Democrats going after it. The Republican frontrunner, Donald Trump, has actually been quite harsh on international trade, on immigration, on tax evasion, on the carried interest loophole, things that traditionally Democrats go after. So certainly you may be getting some spillover from there.
Jared Bernstein, great to see you once again. Thanks.
Nice talking to you.